Welcome to Worldbuild with Us, the podcast where we create fantastical worlds with help from you, our listeners. My name is Rob Hilferty, and I'm here with my co-hosts Daniel Quinn and Christopher Prunty. Gentlemen, so glad to have you on today. Really just I miss your sweet faces all the time. Anyway, on today's episode, we have our very first Patreon prompt from our listener, Gluaxspeed. You might remember Gluaxspeed from a previous episode that we did way back, but he's back and as a Patreon this time. And his prompt for us today is, recently I've been playing around with the world full of stereotypical magic. However, where it gets fun, for us at least, is the idea that magic is treated as some big horrific thing, Lovecraftian style. Certain people are still born with magic, and throughout their lives it constantly calls to them, whispering to them to use it, almost like a second voice constantly with you. And so with that prompt in mind, we're going to be introducing our tenets of this world, and we start from there. So before we get started, let's talk a little bit about Lovecraft, shall we?
Sure. Lovecraft I wouldn't say has a special place in my heart, because the contemporary of his that I studied in undergrad was Clark Ashton Smith.
Yeah.
So they all kind of believe in the same scary things. So what I wanted to do is
we're not talking about the racism, by the way. That's not the scary thing that we're talking about.
That would fit under the umbrella of the scary things they believed in.
I didn't even know that about him.
I don't think Clark Ashton Smith was as a virulent racist as H.P. Lovecraft.
He was pretty bad.
Ruling out that he was.
Yeah, he was pretty bad. But anyway, though, what I'm talking about is the philosophy called cosmicism, which is what appears in, what H.P. Lovecraft developed in his work. And, if we were going to summarize that, it really comes down to that the universe is empty of morality and human feeling in the way that we understand it. And so when we're confronting the universe and the unknown, we're kind of imparting our own meaning into it, when in fact it has none, and it's completely indifferent to human beings. So it's this very stark view of the universe. Yeah, like I mean, it almost takes nihilism a step further, because it not only does it say like there's no meaning in the universe except what you bring to it, but not only is that the case, but the universe is actually indifferent to you. There's one quote that I grabbed from a book called H.P. Lovecraft Against the World, Against Life, and I'm going to butcher the author's name. I think it's Mikhail Holoubek. And he kind of summarizes the cosmicism philosophy as the universe is only a furtive arrangement of elementary particles. The human race will disappear, other races will appear and disappear in turn. The sky will become icy and void, pierced by the feeble light of half-dead stars, which will also disappear. Everything will disappear. And what human beings do is just as free of sense as the free motion of elementary particles. Good, evil, morality, feelings, pure Victorian fictions. Only egotism exists. And when it comes down to it, too, what's interesting in Lovecraft thinking is that science, or the inquiry of rationalism, is usually what opens up those horrors, because we realize nothing has any meaning.
Jesus Christ, Daniel. That is... Woo! Oh, man, I am just ready. That's fun, though. I love... See, okay, one of my favorite comics, right? Is How to Be an Adult, and it's like do cardio, do your groceries, do stuff like that, and then one of the panels is don't let the existential dread set in. And I feel like this is don't let it set in. It is. That's exactly what's happening here, right? Is that we are letting the existential dread settle in, and I'm totally okay with that. So with that as a backdrop, we're now going to try and create a setting that is heavily focused on Lovecraftian style magic. And who wants to go first for their tenet?
I would like to get us started with one of the themes that I always liked about Lovecraft, which was the fear of the unknown. Lovecraft, I believe, is quoted saying that the most primordial thing about humanity is fear, and the most primordial fear is fear of the unknown. One of the tenets that I wanted to establish is whatever the source of magic is, it's either not being correctly used, or we're like siphoning off of something that we barely comprehend or know about. So it's not like worship of a god. It's not making pacts or something. It's it's effectively like we found either something that is like a caveman dealing with a hydrogen bomb and using it as a hammer kind of thing. Like, we do not understand this. And what we are trying to do is only a fraction of what it's actually capable of, or not even close to its real purpose.
I do love the idea of, like, we have this incredibly powerful thing at our disposal, and we're just actually, it reminds me of Kill 6 Billion Demons, where the demiurges are using the powers of creation. And I think someone even remarks, you'll notice that they're using it the same way a man would use a pointy stick. And I like to think that that's what humanity is trying to do here.
I think it's also key that there's like a lack of understanding of what it actually is. And that somehow maybe it started with some sort of science, but now it's out of our understanding. And so,
oh, see, I don't want science to be involved at all. I want no science to be part of this whatsoever.
I think you have to. And here's why. Because
that's his tenet.
Because when you're dealing with Lovecraft, the doorway to horror is science. Like, so it has to start with an inquiry of some kind. Like, people are trying to understand the world rationally, and then it falls apart. Because usually what's horrifying to Lovecraft is the idea that our attempts to figure out the world are what lead us to understanding that it's unfigureoutable.
Okay, your point is valid, and it makes a lot of sense. But I'm still going to go about it.
But I mean, you can end up where you want. Like, so after you get past that door of horror, you end up in a world that's not governed by science, right? Or anything we understand.
Yeah, no, right. And that's where magic comes back
Yeah,
into play.
yeah.
I know. I'm just being a little petulant child about it, okay? Let me have this, Daniel.
Okay.
I kind of view it like Flatland, if you've ever heard that
I love
example.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we've used that before.
Explain Flatland,
Yes.
please.
Oh, wow, this will be fun for me. In Flatland, everyone lives in a 2D space. So you can see the door in front of you. You can't see up, as it were. You would never even understand that up exists or that there's a concept of up. But if you were to introduce a 3-dimensional being to that, it could step inside walls or above or view everything at once. And if you were to get picked up from there by a 3D being, you would have no concept of what was going on, but suddenly you would see a new plane of existence.
Paper Mario, gotcha.
Yes. There's a really great example from Flatland. That's exactly what you're describing, where like the 3D character named Lord Sphere passes through the 2D world.
Hold on. Lord Sphere?
It's got like Victorian feeling to it. But anyway, like Lord Sphere passes through their realm, right? So as 2D entities, what they actually see is a circle getting smaller and bigger as his midsection passes through the 2D plane. So like you only have, like, just like you were saying, Chris, like we only have a sliver of understanding of what's actually happening with this magical power source, but really it has it has a reality we don't perceive,
That's really cool, actually. I like that. And I'm going to take that idea, and with my tenet, I'm going to ground things in reality.
Ooh.
Because one of the things that, Gluaxspeed was talking about, why is magic dangerous? What about it is so dangerous, right? And I wanted to bring about the fact that there's a huge emotional and mental toll when you cast magic. So all magic that we're talking about now is, there's no such thing as a fireball necessarily, right? All of the magic that I want to kind of talk about in this setting is going to require like rituals, like fairly long, drawn out rituals. And that's one thing. That's like, part A. And that's kind of boring. But the interesting thing that I think that I really want to dig into is the material component costs are not necessarily always physical things. It's not always the blood of a virgin. In fact, what I want to talk about is the idea that these material components are going to be memories and emotions. So you fuel magic based on whatever the magic is required. So if you need a mother's love for one spell, or the spite of a spurned lover for another spell. That's the type of thing that I want to be the cost, where those people give up whatever those memories and emotions are associated with the spell.
So you're saying kind of like a sacrifice is required?
Yes, but also it's you remove that part from the person, but also like magic users can take it from others. And the more genuine the emotion, the more powerful the magic. So, you can go out and manufacture something called love, right? But it's not the same as something that you genuinely feel. And I think that's kind of the unknowable aspect to the magic. And also, again, I love the idea of very esoteric and very specific things being required to cast spells.
So it's more like, but so you're saying it's more like almost like a metaphorical requirement sometimes, in the sense that
it creates tangibility within those things. So if you cast a spell that requires a mother's love, that mother will no longer have that love towards that child. They will lose the memories and the emotions associated with that. So it's not as though that you can kind of continually drain a mother for her love of her child. And maybe you can just like bit by bit, piece by piece, to kind of, have a tap of that type of magic. But eventually she's going to dry up, and she's just not going to, she's going to look at that child that she birthed, and she's not going to feel anything regarding that.
So it's like a form of equivalent exchange, in the sense that, like, so I don't know what you would be attempting to do with extracting, say, love from a mother, whatever the result is, but the exchange is a permanent, the permanent source of her love in exchange for whatever you're trying to do.
Correct.
Okay.
So it is like, so when you cast magic, there is a literal emotional cost and toll to the spell that you cast.
Is it always emotional?
It could be memory. So that's part of what I was thinking about. I thought that aspect alone is kind of a big enough deal where you can be, like fairly good in how you cast magic and only use spells that drain from your own personal experience. Right. And then you can also go out and seek others who have those personal and emotional experiences, and then use them as the source instead, if you're less, morally scrupulous.
So you could be like, say you're like you're trying to be a good wizard of this sort, and so you seek out, like, I don't know, mental patients or criminals that have like negative emotions, and you're trying to transfer that out of them into spells.
Right, but each spell would require a specific emotion. So it's not necessarily madness. It's, and maybe the spells that will require madness are not necessarily the spells that you need all the time. So it's not like emotion equals power. It's emotion equals a piece in a puzzle that is this magic ritual.
And are the spells, like, sorry, I have so many questions. Are the spells like really powerful since they require such a price? That's what I wonder. No, okay.
Not at all. I would like to say that because if Chris is going with, we're using magic at like a 0.01 efficiency rate, that the way that we're utilizing magic through this ritual and through this kind of emotional toll, we're clearly not using it right, but we're still managing to get something out of it, right? And it's not massively world changing, but it's like, I'm imagining something along the lines of that's more subtle, that's more hex-like or curse-like, if anything. Again, I want to stay away from fireballs and the big flashy explosive shit, because I think that that's not really what this type of magic is made for. I'm thinking more along the lines of the ability to speak and understand multiple languages, the ability to go invisible for a couple of minutes at a time, like cursing and withering someone else's farm or crops or something like that, like real Pilgrim Crucible type shit when it comes to spells. Nothing huge and major.
Not quite super strength, but like the strength of 4 guys.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm trying to go for.
Or the durability of 4 people would also be pretty.
Right. Or even something like something as quick and easy as, hey, I want to live for 5 more years. or I want, and you just do that enough times, and eventually you'll kind of get a longer lifespan than normal.
Could I add a caveat to yours?
What is it?
I would like it that the draining of emotion when it's not yours still sends back like a reverberation where you take on the emotional toll. So
Ooh.
while you take this mother's love and then put it into a spell, you have to deal with the emotion of loving that child and then losing that love. Like, while that mother doesn't have the memory, you have the memory of it. And you're like, I once loved this child, and now it's like I've lost a child.
Yeah, because you're carrying it, right? Like you're ferrying it from A to B, and you're the one holding it to use it.
Yeah, it's like you're a conduit where there's a little bit of a burn that happens to you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's like there's an empathic burn or something like
Right.
that. See, I think that that's far more interesting as well, because I imagine that you don't want to use that much magic for the reason that you're talking about here, because like, oh man,
You go crazy.
Right, because you're experiencing someone else's madness or someone else's love. But
Mm-hmm.
let me ask you this. By doing that, wouldn't you then become a font for magical powers, because now your emotions are now like you're creating a
Ooh.
loop?
That's
sense,
cool,
right?
because now you can have, if there's people who know how to do this, even with their limited understanding, they do realize that they themselves can be targets, right? So mages can feed on each other.
Ooh.
Or, well, my guess is like, why not just use yourself as it? Because now you're just being able to use that emotion twice, right?
The way I was thinking, based on what you guys are talking about, it sounds like the way I was thinking about what you're saying is that like you're pulling this raw thing from one person, right? Holding on to it so you can use it. But I feel like once you use it, doesn't it go away? Or is it like a residue?
Oh, maybe that's what it is that you're taking the raw element of it,
Right.
and what you're left with is the dross.
That's
like
what I mean. Yeah.
You're like, and maybe it's not like the full experience of that
Mhm.
person, but I imagine that after a while, enough residue gets built up.
Yeah, and it's like gunk inside. It's like a gunk inside
Yeah.
of you. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
I like that.
I kind of view it as the emotional burden of I have loved all the pets that I've ever had, but if I lost 100 pets,
Yeah.
I would have like I'd be burnt out.
You can't handle it anymore because there's pieces of it left in you almost.
And see, this is part of why I want to talk about magic being dangerous, is because one, it has a stigma where you're literally pulling like cherished memories from people. So obviously pretty fucking evil right there.
Yeah.
And then what ends up happening to the magic users is they become these like
husks.
Yeah. Yes, Daniel. I'm so glad that we're on the same fucking page here. Like they become these like husks of just like a melange of just the worst memories, or actually not even the worst necessarily, because I would imagine that.
Yeah.
Right. So, but even still, they become these emotional wrecks that like
they're burnt out.
After a while, they're just like, I don't know what emotions are anymore.
I love that.
Like they're just like they're like psychically broken.
It's like that pool thing we came up with in the Land of a Thousand Gods, like the fractal pool.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But they're people.
Okay.
I could also see people who routinely use the same spell and need the same components.
They're emotion vampires.
They eventually like that part of them is hollow, like we were saying. So imagine you needed unconditional forgiveness, and you've given that out 1,000 times. You would be a psychopath by the end.
You'd be unforgiving. Yeah. It's almost like it burns a hole in your spirit. Like the use of it is eating away at parts of your own spirit.
I think what we're talking about in a more simple term is soul burn.
Yeah,
here, right?
Basically,
where you're literally burning away parts of yourself. And oh man, the idea of being a conduit for other people's emotions, like there is that's like I'm getting like goosebumps thinking about how fucked up that is. That's so cool.
What are you talking about, Dad? I mean, Rob.
Ooh, okay.
And
yeah.
We mentioned, we brought up briefly like the possibility of wizards stealing power from each other. And I guess based on what we've just discussed, that could be like when you freshly take it from someone, there's some vulnerability because maybe that other wizard could take it from you, before you use it.
I'm sure that there's some even rarer, like hyper specific spell that needs that.
Yeah.
Right? Like
oh man,
that specific emotion.
It needs
right?
stolen psychic drama.
Yeah. Also, I love the idea that wizards are seen as emotionally manipulative because they need to be, because magic users are like, oh, wait, you're a magic user?
Oh,
Oh, so
fuck.
I can't trust anything that you're saying
Yeah.
because whatever you're doing, you're just trying to elicit a specific emotion from me right now.
Okay, that
You
is
know?
another thing that I wanted to talk about. Do they need to capture the emotion in the moment, or does it just have to exist in that person?
I think they have to carry it. They can carry it, like, because if they have to use it immediately, it becomes totally impractical.
So I would imagine that the fresher it is, the more powerful
Yeah,
it is.
like maybe there's a timetable, like once you extract it from someone, because imagine like to get a particular emotion, you have to plan ahead and get to that person and trick them and get it out of them. And now you have to, we want to use your spell. Rob was saying that the ritual is complicated. So that means there's other stuff involved. So that means you have to carry the burden of that emotion for a while and then use it.
Right. And then on top, but again, like the stigma surrounding magic users, like, do you really love me, or is this part of a ritual? Do you need my love for a ritual? And so there's like inherent distrust within magic users.
Do people know that the magic users, like, do they know about these people? Like, is it a really large cult?
See, I would imagine I actually, so my second tenet is kind of built around that, but I'm not going to get into it yet. But I would imagine that magic users hide.
Yeah, like, I feel like they're probably not like a big component of known society.
Right, but those who know about them are like incredible. Well, actually, I would say that they're pretty well known. Like, I think that people know that magic is a thing, but also that they are incredibly distrusting of it and recognize that, like, hey, magic users require these things. Like, there's some event that happened, perhaps, where magic is known, and the reason, or the we'll get into that later, I'm sure.
Like a witch hunt probably happened, or
something like that. Yeah,
I can touch on that with a tenant I had.
Please.
The first tenet I was thinking about is to respect the idea of like the Lovecraftian horror begins in an attempt to understand the world. And so my tenet is that whatever opened up the possibility of having this magical understanding started with a scientific revelation. So either it was a form of scientific inquiry or an experiment or a new philosophy that came to be understood, but whatever it is, it destroyed formal systems of thinking. And so now this new way of thinking, you know, it's almost like the void looking back at you, has revealed that something's that there is an incomprehensible understanding that we're drawing this power from.
So it's like a second renaissance, but the second renaissance is like a horrible dark renaissance.
Yes.
Essentially.
So like maybe like, you know, whomever, you know, we're behind going through this scientific understanding made a realization. They're like, holy crap, this is terrible. Maybe they tried to keep it secret, or maybe like a small group of people had access to it, but it's changed them. And so it becomes a source of horror.
So have either of you seen the movie From Beyond?
Nope.
Okay, that is a movie by the guy who directed Reanimator, the 80s Reanimator. And it's essentially about this scientist who does all these experiments on trying to understand different dimensions. And eventually he gets drawn into one. And it's all about like the pineal gland, and it's all about like shit like that, right? Yeah. It's basically sounds like if that were real and it got out to the public, essentially,
exactly.
where it's like, oh, this person, you know, like figured out what's going on with all sorts of Lovecraftian cosmic shit. But people now know about it. And now there's this instinctive like grimace from society, like, oh no, that's what this, oh, that's terrible. You know, like that's this, what's the word I'm looking for? There's this kind of like gut reaction to just reflexively push away from that, right? Because no one wants to know the horrible truth.
Right. Like it could even, I mean, and the word scientific doesn't even necessarily have to mean like the Western science that we understand. It could be like a philosophical reasoning. Like, for example, suppose that this figure proved Descartes' theory of mind, right? Like that's not something that's scientific in a mathematical sense, right? Like that's like he provides a proof for like being, right? That would be a crazy thing to have, but maybe like that proof is truly horrible, you know, that maybe there is no being underneath, and that's the realization. And so, that emptiness is what these wizards use to move emotions between people, but as an example.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of like, the more that I think about it, the more that I'm thinking that this makes more sense as like a fairly modern style of story that we're talking about here. Like where maybe we even say, hey, during the 1920s, this was proven real.
Yeah.
And so now it's the 1930s and we're talking about, what's happening now, that type of thing.
Yeah, I think a modern setting makes sense because
I don't think we've ever done a modern setting, have we?
I don't think we've done a modern setting.
All right, cool. So let's talk about this as though it's our first fairly modern setting.
Yeah,
then. That's kind of cool.
Damn it, that was one of my
and
tenets.
I think that Daniel's no, that's not one of my tenets. I got a second one.
No, that was gonna be my second tenet.
Oh well, then there you go. It's great.
You tell us about it.
No, it's stupid now.
Well, it just means that your tenet was so important and so good that we anticipated that it would be that good.
I don't need your pity.
This is why Chris and I are friends, that I refuse to pity him in any way. Chris, your tenet's dumb and stupid and you should feel bad.
Oh my God.
No, but I actually do think that having a modern setting is actually very fun. I like that idea. Okay, so From Beyond is cool. And I like the idea that we're doing a modern setting. And Chris, was that actually your second tenet?
It was going to be my second tenet. I wanted to force that we couldn't have it in like medieval times or anything.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay. Well, that was easy then. You're out the way then.
My second tenet, it's fairly straightforward, and I think we've covered it to some extent, and that's, we really covered it. And it was simply, I wrote down the magic manifests as powers of the mind. And then I underscored in the quote that I read earlier, only egotism exists, because I thought, even if the magic at the end of the day is being influenced from some other place, like maybe on the other side of the void of that scientific revelation that opened the doors to this, like there's something we don't know, it's alien and horrible. At the end of the day, like we're the ones using the magic and doing terrible things with it. And so that's what I think the quote really means by only egotism exists. Like we're the movers and the shakers and we're responsible. Like the universe itself doesn't give a shit what we do. So that's why I think it's important that the way we understand the magic has to do with one's mental powers and their mental abilities.
Can you expand upon that? Like what are you talking about in terms of scope of humanity then, if that's the case?
I don't know. I'm thinking, because I like that you said rituals, right? And that there's odd coincidence. Maybe there's like kind of what's the name of the guy I'm thinking of? Maybe there are like these weird Jungian coincidences that you have to put together in a ritual to make it happen, like you were saying.
Oh, like a collective unconsciousness type.
Yeah. So like I'm thinking, but maybe the driving force is you have to be certain, you have to like really have a strong mind to do this, because one, you're carrying these emotions, and two, you have to manipulate people to extract them. So that's why I think
hold on. I want to push back on that. You don't necessarily have to manipulate people. Mm-hmm. You can go out and find people who have had those genuine emotions. But sometimes it might just be easier to manipulate people into those emotions rather than go out and find this specific scenario. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's true. I just mean like you have to you can't be some dumb brute that can use these powers. Like you have to have either some charisma or some forethought and intelligence to do this. So like
you need to be a sorcerer or a wizard. I got it.
Yeah. So it's like, I think, and there's something about like being the individual carrying this out. It's not like some supernatural or divine force is what's making you do this. You're doing this because you have access to this power and you're making that choice.
Okay. Cool. I think I have an idea. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm trying to like work this out as I'm thinking about it, and I'm trying to talk about it. Yes. So you'll excuse me. What if, you're saying that only egotism exists, mm-hmm. only the powers of the mind really matter, right?
Yeah.
What if you are the conduit for the spell that you're casting? Like your mind is literally the conduit, which is why you get that weird psychic residue when you cast it.
I like that.
And then like, oh man. Yeah, so like your body being a beacon, or like a literal, you are the wand that you're casting.
You're the instrument of it. Yeah.
Yes, exactly right.
Yeah.
And that makes magic to me sound way more dangerous mm-hmm. and way scarier now.
Yeah, because you could ruin your own wand, and that's you.
Yeah. Yeah. And in this case, your wand is just your fucking brain.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, yeah, that's way more dangerous now.
I
Okay,
mean,
cool.
the scientists or whoever could have proven that nothing exists except minds. And so, like, maybe that's the horrific realization, or part of it.
Oh, like we're like that whole you're just a brain in a mech suit
Yeah,
type thing.
like maybe he proved something horrible like that.
Okay, interesting. So one other thing that for my tenant anyway, is in the original email, Gluaxspeed talked about the idea that magic users are born and they hear magic as though it were a whisper. And my tenant explains that in some ways, right? So my tenet is magic users are only created by the will of their mothers.
Oh,
so
weird.
What that means is that the mother has to willingly give up their life if they want their baby to be born with the gift of magic. So like there's all sorts that we can play in there, but also I wanted to explain the idea that magic whispers to them because that is the actual literal voice of their dead mother speaking to them generationally.
Is it kind of like the Dune witches where they can speak to every generation of their mothers?
Ooh.
No, I wanted it to be more personal than that. I wanted it to be that your mother gives birth to you and exchanges her life for you to have the ability to cast magic, right? So maybe it's not even necessarily that you and you alone are the instrument of magic. Maybe it's like you mixed with some psyche of your mom, essentially. And I know that sounds a bit silly, but it's also like, man, can you imagine if your mother was so power hungry that she wanted you to have this gift, or you have to be so trusting in your community that you have to give up your life and expect others to raise your child, stuff like that.
I can see this working really well in a cult situation. Like, suppose you have this philosopher scientist who created this cult after his theories, and it's mostly just like in every cult, it's a bunch of women following some male psychopath guy. And they're indoctrinated to believe that if they give their mind, like the essence of their mind in the childbirth to the child, they kind of piggyback on and then like open a link to that void from which he's made this understanding. So these women are like, they're cultists basically who believe, and they give birth to these kids, and they're actually, the whispers is the piece of their consciousness tacked on to the child that forms a bridge to the void.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was going for.
I love that.
So it's horrifying.
I hate to blunt the edge of how horrifying that is, but I'm just picturing like your mother's voice in your head. It just, you should call your father. He seems to miss you. He's a nice man. Okay. Why don't you
forever?
Okay, but that's the thing, is that those types of moms are not the moms who are involved in this cult.
These are like crazy, like semi-religious. So it's like a religious cult that's abandoned religion. So it's a religion of a different kind. It's a rationalist religion
of the mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I didn't necessarily think of, like the Nexium cult angle.
Oh, that's exactly what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, no, I wasn't thinking about that, because it's like, well, those women are gone after they birth their child. So it by necessity, you almost need a lot more members, right? And they're always going to be, patriarchal
and attracting women to their cult to brainwash them.
Oh, I suppose that's right. I didn't think about that aspect, but it totally makes sense. And also, one thing I did kind of want to talk about is like the idea of like gender roles now. Like women are incredibly important, and so I would imagine that it's not just finding the weak-willed ones, because maybe that just means
it's finding the strong-willed ones.
Magic.
Yeah,
exactly,
and breaking
them.
Not necessarily breaking them.
Okay, so now I think what you're starting to see is the different factions kind of arising, right? Where you have the weird Nexium ones, where it's like, oh my lord, I'm gonna spread my seed throughout the generation. God. Like you have that one, right? Where it's like disciples of a single guy who's just like been who's manipulative, and then you have like a actual coven of witches.
Yeah,
like,
I would love to see the powerful mothers who are actually in charge when they're subverting the other part of the cult, but they still believe.
Absolutely.
Man.
Okay, so I already have
that's fun.
faction ideas. Just
Yeah,
like
me too.
immediately like just burning a hole in me.
Yeah.
Like I'm gonna spoil next episode already because one of my factions is absolutely going to be Maiden Mother Crone.
Totally.
Yeah.
I can see it.
fuck
I
yeah.
know exactly what
Okay.
you're thinking.
Okay.
Man.
Okay, get the vapors a little bit. Okay, I calm down. Calm down. Okay. All right. So is that all of our tenants? We got 2 out each, right?
Since we used my second tenant a little naturally in it being modern day, I would like to do another tenant where instead of it being spells, while spells can still happen, I want it to be a material thing that you can hold that's like a charm or a item, in the sense that while the spell could make you invisible, the item just makes you a little bit harder to perceive. So you kind of have that natural mundaneness about you while wearing it, kind of thing. But they exist.
So here we're talking about like actual talismans, essentially, right?
Correct, but they're diluted in.
Yeah, no, I respect that. I like that. I like that idea a lot, actually. And then that way you can have non-magic users have these talismans, not even knowing what they're doing.
Yeah, you some normal person just found it and was like, "Oh, this is my good luck charm."
Mm-hmm.
And it's an actual literal good luck charm.
Yes.
It reminds me of I think in early 2nd edition there was like magic items from Psionicis that are basically imbued with a piece of the mind of the character. And here it might be it's imbued with a piece of the emotional resonance of whatever was extracted, which would be kind of neat.
Oh, that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a really cool idea.
Yeah.
All right, so we've all set our tenets, and now we get to go on to the world building jam session. So we're firmly in the modern day genre, and the subject for our anchor is going to be a place, and the theme surrounding that place is going to be treachery and revenge.
Oh boy.
Oh, that doesn't fold naturally into some of the things that we've had.
Not at all. Oh, see, this is what I love, is that sometimes the world building jam session is like, hey, this is really easy and flows really naturally. And this is definitely one of those times, because my God.
There's just so many ways.
I know. So we've got a place that is built around treachery and revenge. Daniel, I think that I want to kind of build on what you were saying. I kind of want to have it be the origin point for where they discovered this break in reality, Yeah. So let's tell a little story all about how our reality got turned upside down.
It was in the west side of our world.
Yeah, around Philadelphia, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Daniel's not getting this reference at all. Daniel,
I thought you literally meant Philadelphia. I'm like, okay.
Oh, wait, it is the modern world.
That's what I thought. I'm like, okay.
Magical Philadelphia. It was just...
No, but also Daniel doesn't get the reference that we're going for here because he's an old ass man.
I don't know.
Well, there were some warlocks that were up to no good.
Yeah, exactly. And they started making trouble in my neighborhood.
Oh, this is I see what you mean. Okay.
God damn.
Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
How the fuck did it take that long, Daniel?
There were not enough rhymes for me to piece it together.
Oh, Daniel.
Hello,
your obliviousness is adorable, but also troubling sometimes.
Look, I only started listening to music until after 1998. And
Fresh Prince was still on after 98.
I know, but like that wasn't the band Garbage. Like I didn't care.
It's a TV show. Daniel,
Will
we're keeping all of this. This is all staying in the podcast. Oh my God, Daniel. Okay. Anyway, let's try and pull this train off the derailed tracks that we're
back onto other tracks.
Yeah. Okay. Let's seriously talk about a place built in treachery and revenge. and having to do with the origin of this dark renaissance.
I've got the revenge bit, but I'm not sure about the first part.
I mean, treachery and revenge are pretty synonymous. What's your revenge bit?
I'm thinking that the cult leader, like, if he discovered that like minds are the only real things, maybe he's like, well, I don't need a body then if I'm just a mind, and he like had himself dismembered or taken apart, and that made him like more powerful somehow. And so maybe there's like that mother cult, like the one that you're talking about, that's like led by the women, is trying to really destroy him for real, and that's the betrayal.
Okay, how does this tie into the place exactly?
Not sure about that, because you said we want to make that be the site of the origin, right?
Which I like. So
I have an idea for the place.
Go ahead.
Seeing how it's modern day and everything, what if we had it be what was originally like a scientific institute where they were playing with the kind of the physics and barriers of space and everything, and the lead scientist was always trying to push his esoteric kind of beliefs of magic and everything, and what he did kind of punctured the hole in the spiritual immaterium and brought magic to those who were ready to hear its whisper.
I love where you're going with that. I have to imagine that with my tenet being, you have to have a willing mother give birth. My guess is that the betrayal and treachery was from the father, right? Like there has to be some level where this is a scientist who is, maybe he's the original cult leader, maybe he's not. I'm guessing that he has to trick his wife into giving up her life so their progeny can have magic, and he can prove the cracks in reality to be true. Something like that.
It could be a mix, this, like you're saying, could be a mix of being both a facility, but also the site of this, the beginning of this cult. Because if we're thinking along the lines of like a Nexium sort of situation, like they approach things like with a veneer of rationalism, and they take things from real psychology to construct their beliefs. So like maybe this was a real institute of science, but maybe instead of science of like space, it's science of the mind. Like, and it was like investigations into like, I don't know, like unconscious thinking. And like, you know, I just watched the movie Get Out, and remember when they put them in like the underneath, I forget what it was called, like the subordinate realm. Yeah. Or no, in Get Out. And like where they kind of, they drop them into this like subconscious realm. Like maybe the investigation was a puncture into the collective unconscious or something that opened something up. And then to Rob's point, like maybe that's the first child that emerged into the woman, you know? And so he's furthering her, giving up her life to make this child move on and become the first like sorcerer.
Ooh. See that? Yeah. And that's kind of why I wanted it to be like a father with his bride, because that's where the treachery and that's where the treachery
is. Yeah, maybe she was a co-scientist. Maybe they were equal scientists. Like they're both working on this together. Aww. And that was part of the trick, is getting her to be the vessel for this thing.
Can I ask one question?
Maybe that's his revelation, is that he needed a human vessel for this, like the first magic user, the first wizard, essentially. Yeah. What was your question?
Why does heartburn medication have a cult?
What? Is it called Nexium?
I thought you said Nexium has a cult.
It's
it's not spelled the same way.
Yeah, it's like it's Roman numerals, and it just sounds like Nexium. Yeah.
I have never heard of this cult.
There's a show on it. There's a show right now out about it.
Last Podcast on the Left talks about it all the time. You've definitely heard about it.
But there's actually like a Netflix show too. I think it's on Netflix.
Yeah, the Jeff Raniere cult. The one with Allison Mack.
Oh.
Yeah, with Allison Mack. Yeah.
God,
you've heard about it.
Yeah, I know, but I know more about GERD right now.
It's in the trend though of like not just Nexium, but Nexium Est. The thing that Scientology is originally based on. They all come out of that weird self-help space.
Wait a minute. I imagine that what we're talking about actually is just kind of like Scientology, right? Where
basically
like, all of those alien spirits are real. And wait, we've just justified. Wait a minute. No.
Well, theirs is
are
a
you-
little different. You know,
Oh,
theirs
and so-
involves volcanoes and spirits trapped
And
in
we
the
could do
atmosphere.
different tiers of wizards, like,
God.
until eventually you don't have any emotions and you've been drained of them and you're clear.
Oh my! What I really like about this though is, have you ever seen Raised by Wolves? That's this new sci-fi series that's out.
You've talked to me about it. I have not seen it yet. No.
I don't want to spoil anything, but what we're thinking of is kind of along the lines where someone looks into a place they shouldn't have looked into, and something has to piggybacks its way out and has to be born into the world. Like that's close to that idea, and I think it's super creepy. That's what I like.
Something comes from the upside down.
Yes, essentially.
Okay. All right. So wait a minute. Is this now like a Rosemary's Baby situation where the mother bears the child, but it's not actually the father who's the actual father?
Yeah, I think it's like partially theirs, but it's also partially from that void of the inner mind.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Where it's like, yep, okay, yeah, holy shit, that's really terrifying now.
But then the question is like, okay, now you've got the first wizard out into the world. How do other mothers then, do they all just learn that this is how they can bring these things out into the world? And they start doing it?
I think that the scientist father, once he realizes what he can do, then it's a matter of
cult
like,
time.
okay, we now, and then it's cult time. Exactly.
I see.
He had 7 brides, and each one of his 7 brides gave birth to 7 sorcerers.
Oh man, this is cool.
Right. Yeah. Okay. And then we can maybe, okay, yes, that's where we're going to stop, because guess what, gentlemen? It's time for our twist.
It was aliens all along is the best way to turn this back into Scientology.
No.
It was Tom Cruise all along.
Come on, Dice. Man on aliens.
It better not be something dumb.
Are you
To
counting
be fair,
aliens as dumb?
That helps.
No, I love aliens.
All right, let's see what happens, gentlemen.
Aliens.
So the twist that we're going to be talking about next week is the big bad wasn't really the big bad.
Oh, that's perfect.
You can go ahead and listen to us talk about that and figure out how we're going to fuck up our setting next week. And until then, that'll be this episode of Worldbuild with us. Thank you so much for listening. If you wanted to send in your own prompt and have us talk about it like we did today, you can go ahead and send us an email at worldbuildwithus@gmail.com. And if you want to have your Worldbuild prompt prioritized, you can always go ahead and pledge to us on Patreon. Patreon members always have their VIP access to our prompts, to our brains, to our mouths. Chris for the last one, though. Alternatively, if you want to go ahead and send us a tweet and maybe send us a prompt that way, you can do so by sending one to @Let'sWorldBuild. And remember that we love you very much. We'll see you next week because we're going to get through this together.